What is up, humans of the cardboard? Welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we are doing another tier list. I love doing these videos. I've been really excited to finally get to this one, and it feels really early, right? Because it's only August, late August. But listen, we pretty much know all the products we're getting for the year. There may be one product Konami like slides in there right at the end of December. But outside of that, I wouldn't even expect whatever product they slide in there to have any new archetypes. So I think for the most part, we know all the new archetypes we're getting for 2021. So today we're going to be ranking them on a tier list of like their overall like everything. So I'm not just looking at where they're going to be as soon as they come out, where they're going to be, like where they are right now. It's going to be where I think they're at now, combined with like other factors like their potential for the future. If they're a deck that can generically work with a lot of other stuff, that may leave me more inclined to move them up a tier if there's just so much potential for them being combined with other stuff. And power, there's obviously looking at the ceiling, what the deck itself does, the other things it has access to, and all that stuff. So yeah, it's kind of like an all-inclusive list, so just keep that in mind. And then other than that, I guess I might as well mention the tiers here. S tier is literally like if they released something like Zodiac out the gate. But even Zodiac needed like a second wave to really be good. Same thing with like Burning Abyss. Burning Abyss might have hit S tier in its heyday, but not until it got like that second wave, I believe, and then really took off. So this is like a crazy tier, but I don't know if we'll be touching that today. So without further ado, let's just get into it. We're going to be going in random order here, nothing in particular, because I think that leaves a little more excitement there. Starting off with Despia. This actually just came out about a week ago, which is really cool. Fusion Archetype combines with really a handful of other Fusion Archetypes. I thought it combined with more Fusion stuff than it does, but I still think it's really solid. I think for me, this ends up in B tier for right now. Again, like it's like Shadal's and Invoked, and like outside of those two, I don't know what this deck really combines with, but that's a pretty nice start anyway, because those archetypes are both meta relevant. So we'll see. It's B tier for me, but it's like the very top of B tier. We've even seen the next wave, and so part of the reason I'm leaving it off here on B tier instead of A tier is we've already seen the next wave, and I'm not sure the next wave is really going to push this into tier 1 level, even competitively in the game. So for now, I'm going to leave it at B tier because I don't know how much support after that they're going to get. But, Albaz is going to get a new structure, so maybe that helps it as well. So this is like high B tier, maybe low A tier. Next up is Sous ships. Yeah, Sous ships for me, no, it's got to be D tier, right? This is a meme deck more than anything, right? Like, it's definitely not designed to be the next meta deck. Konami knows that, we know that, but it's cool and it's fun. Some of their rank monsters are generic, at least, so other decks can try and mess around with them. They just don't really seem to have like a really solidified like crazy win condition. But they're fun. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. They're just fun more than anything. Okay, next up after that, I have Magick. Now, this is a really interesting one because I kind of flow with Magick between B and C tier, because while right now it's not going to do much, after Burst of Destiny, we do get like literally the 3 best cards in the archetype. And they really do help the deck a lot. The new Synchro is amazing, the new main deck monster is amazing, and the new Counter Trap is a very nice piece that the Synchro just gets for free. So just making the Synchro is 2 solid interruptions, and you got to give value to that for a combo deck where even if they don't go combo, if they can at least make him through hand traps, your opponent might be 1-2 cards out of the hand, and you got 2 interruptions because all you did was make 1 Synchro. So we'll take that. So for me, it's so tough, man. I'm going to leave it in low B tier. I think it's lower B tier, though, because it is one of those combo decks where, like, I don't think you have a ton of room for, like, hand traps and stuff because you want to see extenders, you want to see your starters. But you do have pretty easy combo. And as far as I've seen, it plays through interruptions fairly well. So I'm going to leave it, low B tier. I think this deck could top a regional for sure, especially a dedicated player that put in the time with it. I could see that happening. Next up is B Troopers. I love this archetype. I love this deck. It's very cool. This is the exact kind of combo deck that I tend to like. Very cool. Just taking advantage of all the crazy insect stuff. So For me, this is A tier. And I know you might be like, John, are you serious? Despia is B tier, but B troopers are A tier? Hear me out. Despia, I thought worked more, like, better with a lot more fusion stuff in general, but I think it works only really with the two archetypes I named earlier. So it's not really as generic as I thought. I do think the Albaz stuff helps, but obviously I said, like, this kind of floats on bottom A tier, and B Trooper to me is more lower A tier as well. But here's the thing with B Troopers, all right? One, they're already better than I thought. I thought they were like baby rogue, but they're rogue and then some already. They do some crazy things. They play through interruption well. They end on some like insane amount of interruptions when you open solid hands, and the deck's consistent because the deck is nothing but like starters and extenders pretty much. So I like it a lot. And not only that, but we already have a confirmed wave of support coming in Burst of Destiny. We don't know what it is, so I'm optimistic though. So again, that helps. And we have the Inzector spell, which apparently is just going to be Inzector Barrage, summon an Inzector from the deck or equip an Inzector from the deck, which is a lot of what the deck needs. One, the deck needs removal, and getting easy access to Hornet plays is nice for just getting access to that. Cool. And two, that could just be an insane extender that really helps raise the ceiling of the deck even higher. I don't think you'll be playing a huge Inzector package, but it does make an Inzector package much more alluring. So yeah, a lot of stuff coming. And also just the deck works with any insects. Any insect we ever get from now on forever, you're going to say, how does it work with B Troopers? Oh, it's good. Cool. Or it doesn't. Like, so now it's just like set up so well for the future because it works generically with like any insect stuff. So for me, this is A tier. I think it's a solid A tier to low A tier. Like, it's like super high A tier because I don't know how meta it will ever be, but you know, we'll take that. Next up is Flunderies. This is a Burst of Destiny archetype. A lot of people thought it was like really crazy when it came out. I still think it's solid. I just don't think it's like out of this world insane. It still loses to very specific things, but it also takes advantage of the metagame specific things. Like, this deck can really dunk on a lot of meta decks because it can take advantage of, you know, floodgates like Macro, Cosmos, and Dimensional Fisher can play a hand trap like Dimension Shifter. So I think this is an A tier for me. I think as it comes out, it's going to be maybe not tier 1, but like borderline 1, 1.5, maybe tier 2, but even that is worth something to me. And you got to keep in mind, this deck kind of generically works with Winged Beasts, right? Like, you have a monster that searches any Winged Beast with that's level 4 or lower. You also have one that searches any Winged Beast that's level 7 or higher, and that's already like kind of solid. Also, you can't discount the fact that this deck can take advantage of so many generic cards that other meta decks have not been able to take advantage of for so long. We can play Pot of Duality in this deck. This can play Prosperity or Duality because you don't need the extra deck at all. That makes something like Dogmatic a Punishment, a really nice tech card in the deck, and stuff like that. Anything that needs your extra deck, like, you can just play all these tech cards. If you ever play against, you know, Cyber Dragon, you could just have Chimera Tech in there as a 1-up just to like ace that matchup, no problem. All that stuff. So the deck can really just play a lot of cards that decks we've seen be meta relevant and not be able to play for so long. So for me, I'm keeping it A tier. I think it's slightly above Beat Troopers because I already know that this deck can be like legitimately competitively relevant. I just don't know if Beat Troopers are right now like borderline, and we still have to wait on unknowns. So because we're waiting on unknowns, I'm going to leave it one tick lower, but they're close. They're close for me. Next up is Shangjan or Sword Soul, the new worm archetype coming in Burst of Destiny. This is easily the highest ranking one on here. It's not close. This deck is like really, really good. It's going to be tier 1 out the gate. I feel very, very confident in that. Listen, you just have like super easy synchro plays that get you value back. It's insane. You set up like 2 interruptions off of 1 card with an extra draw, and that's all you really need to know. Like, yeah, so the deck's really, really strong. Seems to have it really has a lot of tools. There's already a lot of good generic rank 8s they can take advantage of. We're also going to get the new Fleur monster, which they can take advantage of very, very easily. It's going to be a good deck. It works with worms generically. It's just really solid. So definitely don't sleep on it. This is by far and away has to be the highest thing. Closest thing to S tier on this list, but I don't think quite makes S tier for me. Next up, we have Ice Jade. Ice Jade's an interesting one. It's just going to be D tier. I think it's D tier, and I think it's worse than Sous ships. Now, maybe a little bit better because it just has the genericness to it. Like, and listen, I've had people in my comments tell me like, "But John, do you just wait? The Water Archetype's going to come along, and this is going to be the perfect thing for it." It's not that I'm like undervaluing the fact that it works with any Water Archetype. Really, it's more so that just when you read the cards, they're all extremely underwhelming. They're like, oh, summon a water from hand. Like, it's just a neg one. Like, they're all just neg ones. Now they do have their effects in Grave, which are kind of floaty, but they just float into like one body of itself, and like we said, like they're mediocre extenders. So like if they were better extenders, I'd be like, oh well, this Archetype by itself doesn't really do much, but I could see it working with a lot of water stuff. Unfortunately, like as extenders, they're really mediocre cards. They're just not powerful cards. So I still think that ceiling's really low. If we get more cards, we just don't even have to confirm that we're getting more cards. Maybe it'll change my mind, but for now they are D tier for me. Then we have Punk. This is a cool one. Man, Punk is one I kind of go back and forth on. I think I'm going to end up with it in super high C tier. Man. No, actually, I'm going to put it in B tier. Here's the thing. Low B tier, though. It gives me Prank Kid vibes. It gives a lot of people Prank Kid vibes. But the difference here is, one, a Link 1 doesn't save this archetype. And two, while all the monsters are really cool and they're all like +1s, you're +1 in awkward ways. The deck doesn't even really have a lot of plays right now. It's just it's just funnel into that synchro monster, and that's kind of it. So we really need them to piece things together, but it's a cool looking archetype. I think a lot of people are going to like the artwork. Maybe that drives Konami to really make good support and really turn it around for here. So I'm hopeful, but for now I think it's low B tier. Brave Token. Brave Token, I think, is C tier. I think this has a little bit more potential than things down here in D tier, just because it doesn't really have a normal summon, which means it can combine with other stuff. It does kind of lock you out of your normal summon's effect, but that doesn't necessarily make your normal summon useless. I don't know. I think it has a little bit of splashability, and it's honestly just up in the air, right, with how this deck really works. So I think they really need to like solidify it. It just feels like it's kind of a little bit all over the place. Not that it's bad, but it's bad. So C tier for me. Spriggans, C tier, but much higher C tier. This is like way low C tier. This is like top of C tier. Spriggans, I still believe has like potential. Okay, here's the thing: like the deck does like its plays with just the field spell a lot of the time, so you don't use your normal summon. So I haven't seen many people really try and combine it with scraps, which I think might be the best way. Give a really high ceiling normal summon to your play, bait hand traps and all that stuff. And I think that could actually be pretty advantageous. But I think the mechanic is cool. They just didn't give the deck any good normal summons. And if they had like 1 or 2 like really good normal summons, I think the deck would be a lot different. People would look at it differently. So for now, I think it's still high C tier. I still think the deck does some cool things. Still think there's some openness to potentially be combined with other stuff. But for now, high C tier for me. Next up is Exorcister. This is another really cool one. I'm going to put Exorcister in B tier. I actually think it's higher potential than both Magick and this. So on reading them initially, I kind of like misinterpreted the way they work. They don't work when a card is banished by your opponent's card effect. It's just when any card is moved from the graveyard, right? When your opponent does anything by your opponent. It has to be by your opponent, but still that includes adding the hand, summoning from grave, banishing something from grave, or shuffling something back into the deck. So when you read through every deck almost in the game, you're kind of like, oh, that triggers that has to do that, so that triggers that. Wow, a lot of these decks just can't even play without allowing the Exorcisters to trigger. And when they trigger, they have some powerful effects. Their Exades are definitely the strong point of the archetype. So they do some really cool things. I wish their like on-field effects were a little bit better generally. Like their other, not even their on-field effects, their other effects were a little bit better for the main deck ones. But what are we going to do? We still got one card unrevealed here, so that's definitely one thing to keep in mind. But for now, I think it's cool, and I think it has potential as like an anti-meta archetype for sure. And you know, I think there's definitely some room to work here, and there's no restrictions in the archetype like at all, really. Next up is S-Force. I think S-Force probably goes above Brave Token right now. but definitely below Springans. The Archetype has a couple of cool cards, but like outside of those cool cards, the deck, it's just nothing, just a bunch of poo. They printed like multiple, like almost useless cards for the Archetype, so it's kind of tough. We'll see if they come back to it, or like I kind of have hope to, like, for this Handspring, just because they are part of like lore chain, like connections in the game, right? Like they're connected to like the Psi Frames and the Time Thieves, whereas Springans are obviously connected to all the Dogmatica stuff. So you never know, Konami could easily come back to these, and that gives me a little bit of hope for the future. But yep, easy C tier for me. Warrock, yeah. Honestly, I think Warrock's like probably about here. Probably above Sous ship, probably below Ice Jade, just because Ice Jade can combine with water archetypes generically. Yeah, here's the thing with Warrock. This would be the only F tier on here if they didn't get their quick play spell. Their quick play spell is actually pretty nice. A lot of archetypes wish they had a quick play spell like that. And so like it's fine, but the deck doesn't really do anything. You have a searcher, but you can only search after when it battles. So like turn one, you cannot search anything. You can't even get to your, you can't like search out your quick play spell. So it's just like a really awkward archetype. It wants to go second, but it has cards that want to search like they go first, and it's just not the move. So D tier for me. Sorry if you're a Warrock fan. They just stink, man. I'm sorry. Sun Avalon though, this is low A tier for me. It really is. Listen, plants are one of those archetypes that's kind of now like insects, kind of now like zombies, where there's just a lot of just generically solid plant cards out there. And they work with any plant archetype. So not only that, but the new spell card is insane from Burst of Destiny. Without that, like that spell card, I think is going to break open like a lot of plant lists. And I think the deck's going to be legit, not necessarily legitimately tier 1, but just because like insects, like any plant card that comes out, any plant archetype that comes out, you have to immediately look at like the Sun Avalon stuff and the Arrow Mage stuff and the like Rika stuff. Like there are multiple different archetypes you have to like look at now, and generic cards to just be like, wow, this my deck is so buffed just from the stuff that already exists. So I definitely think plants have a nice little future there for sure. Next up is Starry Nights. I mean, maybe I'll be generous. Oh man, Starry Nights. Starry Nights, I think is like at the very top of D tier, maybe bottom C tier. Their new monster is helpful, I will say that, but the deck just does so little. The interruptions, the board states that the deck sets up are so beatable. It's crazy. Like at absolute most, it feels like the archetype via its like own engine. I guess you technically open some traps with it, but like that's like the best possible hand. The deck only sets up like a pop, and if in a really good hand, the pop plus that negate, right? I think it has a negate by like shuffling the monster back in the deck or sending it back to hand, whatever it is, the trap card. That is like the most the archetype can do turn 1. And it's just not enough. I think it's D tier. Maybe you could say with the new monster, it could be put at low C tier, but I think I'm just going to throw it in D tier here. Next up is Ogdo Attic. I still think this is B tier. I think it's probably above these two, just because again it works with reptile stuff. Now the pool for reptiles is much worse than these two, so I think that's mainly why this ends up down here. But I still have hope for this archetype. I still think it's a really solid start, generically working with a lot of just reptile stuff. You have something as insane as Snake Rain. Hopefully we'll be able to take advantage of it. I mean, we do have some other stuff coming. We have reptilian stuff plus, what is the other one? There's another thing that's coming out with it, another reptile. Reptilian. And we're getting the alien stuff. We just got the alien stuff. So like we're still getting reptile stuff. It's going to slightly make this more and more better, and then maybe at some point they'll make something that really breaks it open. Also, we've gotten no support for this archetype after its initial release, which the other two archetypes in that pack have, which is kind of funny to me. Okay. Soulful Cord. I think Soulful Cord is probably like mid to high C tier. Like, I get it. It can combine with like a ton of, I don't know. You know what? We'll throw it at low B tier. Like, only for the sole fact that like, yes, their cards can plus pretty decently, and they can combine with any pendulum archetype out there. You know what? No, high C tier. High C tier. Because I think like the best pendulum archetypes are just going to say like, this archetype's not good enough. The other ones are just better, more impactful. So, yeah. High C tier for me. Earth's Arctic, also an easy C tier. I think it still has potential to get more support, but I think for now it's like, I don't know, somewhere in here. The deck just goes super neg to do its plays. Like, all of their monsters are discarding for cost. You do have ways to somewhat mitigate it, but it's like you never go plus. You, like, at best go break even from what I've seen. So, I don't know. Plays are just kind of underwhelming. Next up, we have 3 Musketeers. I couldn't get a picture of one of the new ones, or at least I just didn't look long. But yeah, the 3 Musketeer archetype, the, like, you know, the Knights. It has to be one of these, right? I think I might give it the benefit of the doubt and give it, like, I don't know, C tier, but it's like lower C tier. The deck can do some things. It actually does more than I thought it does, or did, but it's still not, like, crazy. You know what I mean? Like, I think the play, I still think it definitely needs, like, a legit play going second. But the deck seems like it can actually grind, kind of funny enough, but it has some powerful cards. It locks you out into specific stuff. It doesn't have a lot of generic applicability, so I'm going to keep it low on the tiers, but it can actually do some things, which is cool. And the last archetype we have here is Amazement. I'm going to keep this in B tier. I might have thought this was A tier before, but now I think it's just probably somewhere like here. I think it's actually pretty high B tier. I mean, listen, any archetype that plays generic normal traps, not even generic, just normal traps, this deck can be a possible splashable engine with. So I think it's definitely something to keep in mind. I think we've been in a metagame where this archetype hasn't been particularly strong. A lot of stuff that's link based, so Book of Mooning them isn't the best thing in the world if they can get to any links. And so, you know, the deck definitely loses a little bit of allure there. But as we shift metagames, and maybe we end up in metagames where not everything is like link based, I do think you could take advantage of a deck like this being able to Book a Moon so easily. We might get more traps to add versatility in the way it disrupts, but it is actually pretty powerful. It's kind of like a more generic multi-faker, which is cool. It definitely has value for sure. And so I think they might have their time later down the line. But yeah, for now, that's our tier list. Those are the 20 archetypes from 2021. The only things I would note is that, like, Exorcister and the Punk and the Brave token archetypes still all have 1 card unrevealed just from their initial release. So you never know when the 1 card is going to be like the most insane thing that makes the archetype like so much better. But unless they are really game changing, I think they'll stay about where they are. Feel free to let me know in the comment section your list, like what you would change around here, what decks you would shift up or down. And yeah, that's gonna do it for me here. I love doing these videos. Let me know your thoughts down below on the video. I will see you in the next one, and see ya.